Hey everyone, welcome back to the Michael's Mormon Deconstruction channel. Today I'm not going to be talking directly or specifically about Mormonism, but I wanted to talk to you about this book I just read. I've read it before, this is a reread, but it's called The Giver. It's by Lois Lowry. I don't know why I stuttered on that name, it shouldn't be that hard to say. Lois Lowry. And this book left much more of a lasting impact on me reading it now after I've done my religious journey, and while I'm still on it, than it did when I was still a truly, fully believing Mormon. For more information on my background, where I come from, what my experience with Mormonism was, and all those things, there's other videos on my channel that I think could describe that better. I'd rather focus more on this book. So let's go through it together. I'm basically going to be giving you my own retelling of the events of the story and mapping it onto some sort of real life scenario, some things in society, some kind of religion, or some kind of, society at large, okay? And of course, major warning, hey, major warning, look at me. If you haven't read this book, or you want to watch the movie, this is not the video for you. There's going to be plenty of spoilers. I'm going to be going over the entire plot, including the ending, because I think it's important to describe how the book maps onto this, what I'm trying to talk about. So, if you intend to read this, click away, come back later, read the book, highly recommend it, and I would love to hear your thoughts after you come back and read it. And I'd love for you to hear mine as well. So let's talk about the general gist of the book first, okay? So, there's a kid named Jonas. He's the main character of our story. He is, I think, 11 at the beginning of the story, or 10, one of the two, okay? And Jonas lives in a perfectly utopian society, at least from his point of view, a perfectly utopian society, where everyone is happy, people live in their family units until they turn 12. Once they turn 12, they get to have a job and contribute to society. Nobody is ever different, is kind of the idea. The society is built around the idea of quelling individuality, and basically it's not only encouraged to quell individuality, it's strictly enforced. If you do anything that is individualistic, you are chastised for it, and if you continue to do it, you are exiled from the community. And we learn later in the book that exilement is not like go in and do your own thing. It is, we will basically euthanize you. You are going to die because you are not contributing to society in the correct way. Okay. So that's kind of the background of this story. That's where it all begins. That's the setting, okay? At age 12, I think I mentioned this, but at age 12 in this society, you are assigned your role in society, whether it be a caretaker for the old, whether it be a teacher, whether it be, a groundsman, whether it be an announcer, all of these things. You would get assigned a role, and that would be the role for the rest of your life until you become old. And then once you become old, you get to lounge around for a little bit, and then you are released. And by released, I mean euthanized. They will eventually kill you, right? Okay, but all that being said, Jonas, the main character of this story, we learn a lot about Jonas, and we learn about how his interactions with society are mostly the same. The first half of the book or so is basically just talking about how Jonas is a perfect member of this society, just like everyone else in the society is a perfect member of the society. When Jonas is getting close to the ceremony of 12, though, we learn that he's been having a few new experiences that kind of make him a little different, okay? So, firstly, the first time he notices these differences is, I think he's still around 10 or 11 in this part of the story, okay? But he's throwing an apple back and forth with one of his friends because his friend needs help with getting his hand-eye coordination up, okay? So they're throwing an apple back and forth, and Jonas notices while it's flying through the air, he sees something weird about the apple. He sees something different about it. He sees it maybe glimmer in the light or something like that. And he sits there, he grabs the apple, he stares at it, and he's like, what was that? He's like looking at it, and he can't see the thing that made it special anymore. So he chalks it up to something weird. He throws it back to the guy. The guy throws it back to him. He sees it again. And he goes, what the hell? Like, what was that? So he asks his friend, did you see that? And his friend goes, no, what are you talking? Like, no, absolutely not. And honestly, his friend becomes a little uncomfortable that he even asked that question. And Jonas says, okay, never mind. Don't worry about it. Because the last thing you want to do in the society, it's very frowned upon, is to make other people uncomfortable or be rude, basically. Don't be rude. Don't make people uncomfortable. Everyone should just be happy and treat each other respectfully for that reason. Okay? We learn later in the book that what Jonas saw was the color red. We learn that nobody in society can see color. But for some reason, Jonas is able to do that. And not like consistently and not often, but every once in a while, some little thing will glimmer, whether it's the red apple, or it's a girl's hair that happens to be red, for example, or a flower, okay? So Jonas is able to start seeing this color. He doesn't really chalk it up to anything special. He just assumes there must be something going on, or maybe he just is noticing something that everyone else already has noticed, and he wants to forget that it was a thing, basically. Okay? So let's pause right there, okay? I'm going to mark this in my notes just where I pause, just so I can remember. So he saw the color, but he didn't know, okay? And when he tried to bring this up to other people, they didn't, I don't want to say they wrote him off, but they basically said, oh no, I didn't see it. And Jonas, as someone who was very much motivated to remain in his community and remain a normal member, an individual that wasn't individual, like just a piece in the machine, he didn't stir any feathers. But you can tell at this point in the book that Jonas feels a little isolated by that experience. He wonders, why am I able to see something that people aren't able to see? And I think you kind of can see where I'm going with this, right? Let's map this onto my Mormon journey and the journey of many other people who leave the Mormon church, okay? The idea being, sometimes, you might start noticing something that's a little weird. You're like, wait a second. Aren't we taught that we're not supposed to drink coffee and tea, for example, okay? Or aren't we taught that we're not supposed to drink coffee and tea in the church? And, everyone will go, yes, that is correct. You follow that up with a question like, but doesn't the book itself that Joseph Smith wrote with all the rules that we're supposed to follow, doesn't it say that we're not supposed to drink hot drinks? And people will go, yes, that's right. Your follow-up question, of course, is, well, why are we allowed to drink hot chocolate? Like that feels like the obvious response. Or why are we allowed to drink hot apple cider? And their response will be, well, the prophet said so, and that's how they interpret it now, so whatever. And typically your response to that, if you're a good believing member, is, oh, okay. You'll kind of like shelf it. You'll be like, okay, I guess that makes sense. It doesn't really make sense to me, but that's fine. I don't want to rock the boat. I want to be a good member of this church. I believe in this church. I believe in the good that it does. So I'm going to give up the individual experience or the weird thing I noticed for the sake of being still a good member of this community and fitting in, right? So you can see kind of where the rest of my mapping on of this book to Mormonism is going to come from. Okay, that's the perspective I'm sharing. Let's continue in the summary of my retelling of the story. So a little bit later, Jonas starts noticing other things, not that make him different, but just like things that he notices. He tells his parents in this society, just as background, in this society, as in the society in here, not this society, okay? Children are expected to tell their parents the dreams they have, okay? That's part of their dinner routine. So Jonas goes to dinner one day, and by goes to dinner, I mean goes to his dinner table in his house, and he tells his parents, I had a dream. And his parents go, okay, tell us about it. And basically he describes this dream where he is he's by the river, and he is hanging out with this girl, okay? This girl, and he describes her. He says, this dream was very pleasurable. I was having so much fun. We held hands together. It was amazing. I loved it. His mother immediately, no shame. She's like, there's no shame. Oh, that's completely normal. You're getting to be around that age. You're 11 or 12. Okay. He's 11 at this time, somewhere around there. And she goes, that's completely normal. These are called the stirrings. He's like, oh, the stirrings? Yeah, I've heard of that. I've heard other people describe that. And mom goes, oh, great. Okay, good. I'm glad that your peers are, talking about this too. We have a pill for that. And he's like, oh, okay, cool. That's exactly what he and the mom describes. Basically, this pill is to suppress the stirrings, because the stirrings are ways that are going to mess you up in society. They're going to do something wrong, okay? So she says, I'll get you a pill tomorrow, and we'll make sure, or in fact, I think she calls for it the night of, but she gets him a pill that he takes every night, and they're meant to suppress the stirrings, meaning basically suppress his sexuality, suppress his ability to have those kinds of thoughts, okay, and dreams. I think there's a pretty obvious mapping on here, but if it's not obvious to you, let me walk you through it, okay? The Mormon Church notoriously controls the sexuality of its members. That might be a controversial statement for people that are members, and I apologize if it sounds harsh, but let me walk you through it, okay? Children are given a pamphlet called For the Strength of Youth. If you're more interested in this pamphlet, by the way, I have a whole video just going over the pamphlet, so I would love for you to watch that. But they're given this pamphlet when they turn 12, and this pamphlet has sections on basically what a good Mormon youth is meant to be and how they're meant to act. So for example, there's guidance on how to dress. There's guidance on how to speak. There's guidance on the kinds of music you should listen to. And for the sake of this, and the most important thing in my opinion is there's guidance on how to date and how to express sexuality, okay? And the church specifically writes up, and I'm not going to go into depth here, okay? But the church basically says, do not have sex until marriage. Do not express, physical love outside of marriage. Do not touch the private parts of any person before you're married. And don't touch the private parts of yourself either. In the wording they specifically use is, do not arouse these emotions in yourself. Okay? I would imagine if the Mormon Church had a pill that you could take, would they give it to you? Maybe, maybe not. But I think that the mapping on to this makes sense, right? Where the society kind of depends on people not just being themselves, and instead making sure that they do what the society tells them to do. Okay? And of course, that can be a painful thing unless you're bought into the idea. And that's the part I think is more important to map on. Most Mormons don't look at these rules about sex and these rules about relationships and all of that as restrictions. They view them as blessings. They view them as guidance. They feel like they are wisdom, basically, coming to them from a deity. And in a similar way in this book, when Jonas is told by his mom, oh, that's normal, and you need to start taking these pills to just stop those feelings, because that's what everyone does, all the adults do it. He doesn't look at that and be like, I'm suspicious of that. He actually, and I think this is an interesting part of the story, he says, oh, this is so great. This is like a coming of age for me. I finally get to be like everyone else, and I get to start following this rule of taking the pill because I started getting the stirrings. And that sense of pride is something that is relatable to me as someone who, when I was being raised Mormon, and even a little bit today, there's still remnants of this, but I used to take pride in the fact that I did not have any sort of sexual relationship until, or ever, really, basically. I used to take pride in the fact that I was different in society, but the same as all of my peers. I was proud of the fact that I was able to follow all these rules and do it, because I knew that it was for the better of the betterment of something. It was for the good of the society, for the good of the religion, something like that, okay? That was kind of the idea. So that sense of pride is very interesting because I think it ties into how Jonas will later feel about society, okay? So let's move on in the story a little bit. I have my notes over here. That's why I keep looking over here. So Jonas is about to turn 12. And by turn 12, I mean hit the 12th year of being in society, because no one in the society has birthdays. So when one of them turn 12, they all turn 12. They go to the ceremony of 12s is what they call it, okay? And the tradition in this society is at the ceremony of 12s, every kid is basically becoming a grown-up, and they're going to be given their assignment for what their role in society is. Jonas is number 19, I think. 19 or 20. Let's go with 19, okay? Of the 50 or whatever kids in his class. Number 1 gets called up in the ceremony, gets given their role. Number 2 gets called up, given their role. So on and so on. 18 gets their role. And then, very strangely, number 20 is called up. Skipping 19, meaning skipping Jonas. And Jonas is getting this, he immediately when they call 20, he gets this anxiety. He gets this sinking feeling of, oh God, they forgot me. And then he starts thinking, okay, they must have made a mistake. They must have done. And then he's like, but then he re-rationalizes even that and says, no, they don't make mistakes. So this must have been intentional. What could be happening? I want to pause right there. That alone, that feeling of, wait, they made a mistake. And then immediately your brain going to, oh, wait, no, they don't make mistakes, actually. Let me reframe this in a way that doesn't frame them as making a mistake, because he's been taught his entire life, these people don't make mistakes. It's all intentional. Now, for the sake of this book, that's true, and this wasn't intentional, and he was actually right to say, oh, they don't make mistakes in this scenario. But, the mapping onto that of when the church, always back to Mormonism, because that's my whole thing, when the church has that kind of thing, and they say something that feels wrong, for example, the policy they had in the late 2010s to say that children of gay people could not be baptized into the church. When something like that happens, the members first will be like, wait, that sounds bad. Wait, I don't like that. And then they think about it a little more and they're like, oh, but wait, we're not supposed to ever question the prophets. They should never do anything wrong. The point being, when someone feels that they are disagreeing with what they believe to be the authority, or what they believe to be something that's infallible, I think is a better way to put it. They're not met with feelings of, ha ha ha, finally, I figured out how these infallible people are fallible, baby. We figured it out. The feeling is not that, okay? That's not the experience you have when you're starting to question something that you forever believed is infallible and perfect, basically. The feeling you get is extreme anxiety. You get, oh my God, wait, what's happening? There must be some deep reason for this. There must be some, the point being, the criticism doesn't start going to the people that it should be going to in all sense, in reality. Instead, it goes inward. And that's something that being in a religion like Mormonism does to you. When something goes wrong with the church, or the church does something wrong to you or messes you up, your hatred for it, or your anxiety towards it, or any of these things don't go towards the correct place. They go inward, and then it spirals and it keeps going that way. And that's one of the many ways that I think that the church is harmful, okay? As someone who finds a lot of good in the church as well, that's a way that it's harmful. Okay, that was a long tangent. Let me continue. So Jonas is skipped over. They go through all the rest of the students, all up to 50 or whatever it is, whatever the number is. And Jonas is still sitting there like, this was definitely on purpose now that they've skipped everyone but me. And then the announcer, or whoever it is on the stage, goes, you may have noticed we skipped someone. Right after that is said, Jonas immediately feels a sense of relief, like, oh, good, we're back into the plan. It must have been something weird that I don't know about, but it's part of the plan, so we're good. Whew. We take a break. The announcer then announces Jonas is giving it a great honor. He's giving a role that they call the receiver of memories. And of course, your question, the logical question is, what is the receiver of memories, of course? This isn't revealed to Jonas yet. He basically is just told in the ceremony, this is an amazing honor. The process will be painful, but it's so honorable, and you are going to be very well respected for having this role. This doesn't really help Jonas feel safer about it, but he does, like I said, he views this as an infallible process. He sees this as perfect. So he says to himself, I have all this anxiety. I'm worried about this, but I trust. I have faith, basically. I have faith that this is going to be the right thing. So we pause here very briefly, and we just note the fact that basically this entire society, this dystopia of a sort, is based entirely on faith. Okay, well, let's just put that in our back pocket for now. So Jonas is given the role of the receiver of memories. We learn later what this role means. It basically means that the entire weight of the community's history, emotions, past experiences, all of that, especially the experiences of before they were in their own little bubble, he is going to be the next person to be responsible for bearing all of that. In a concept that's kind of hard to understand in this book and is not explained very well, is the idea of memory. The point that this book makes, and I just want to summarize this really quickly because I think it's important to understand the rest of what I'm going to talk about, is no one in society has any memory of what life was like outside of this society. They have a concept of a place called elsewhere, which is just anywhere outside of their little, boxed-in community. But they don't really know what elsewhere is. They just know that it's somewhere else. That's why it's kind of called that. And these people basically are made so they don't have the capability to remember anything other than within their own experience. They're not allowed to read any books other than the books that are the rule book, basically, or, some simple, like, children's school books. And, yeah, the idea is that all the history, all the knowledge of anything outside of the homogeneity? How do you say that? One second, we're doing a quick sidebar. Homogeneity, right? Is that it?
Homogeneity.
Okay, there we go. Outside of the homogeneity of his society, none of them have any sort of knowledge of this. Okay, but what the receiver of memories, their job is to be the one person in society that actually does have that knowledge. The idea being that there's currently one person like that, and they're getting up there in age. They're not going to last forever. And they need a new one to basically pass down all of this knowledge to. which is where we get the term the giver. The giver, because the giver is the previous receiver, and he gives the information to the receiver. And an idea explained in this book is, if the receiver goes away, dies, or something like that, all of the memories that this one person's holding for the entire community will then become the community's responsibility to bear, which is why they need to have a single person to do it. And this one person can be their source for wisdom when they need to answer a question that is unanswerable within the bounds of their own knowledge. Okay? So, Jonas becomes the receiver. He's worried about it, but he's excited too. It seems like a big, responsibility. So he rides his bike to his first day in his training for his new role. As every 12 does, they go to their training on their first, whatever. And he meets a man who doesn't identify himself. We never learn his name, but he later identifies himself as the giver. Okay? And the giver explains to him what I just explained to you, that there are memories, there are things that beyond the society that we need to understand. And by we, I mean the receiver and the giver need to understand, and why we need to understand it. So, and the giver also warns him, this is going to cause you great pain. So you better be ready for it, and I want you to be brave, basically. So let's pause right here. Let's talk about this idea. The idea that there is some forbidden knowledge that not only is forbidden, and I want to be clear about this book. This is not 1984 style where there's people higher up who have all the knowledge and they're purposely trying to deceive everyone under them. That's not what this book is critiquing, okay? So let's be very clear. What this book is more critiquing, it's kind of critiquing groupthink and lack of individuality. That's kind of more what it's about, okay? And the reason being, the people in charge that are making all the rules, they live within the same... I don't want to say, but they live within the same ignorance that the rest of the society lives in, okay? The only people who have any knowledge of anything outside of the society is this one person, and now soon to be two people once it's handed off to Jonas, okay? So Jonas walks in, talks to the receiver. The receiver warns him, says it's going to be great pain. So the receiver tells him, we're going to make sure that we start you off with some good memories so you aren't immediately scared off or driven insane, okay? So the receiver puts his hands on Jonas's back and he transmits a memory. This memory being the memory of feeling snow on your face, the feeling of being cold, riding down a sled. That's the first vision or emotion or thing that he's feeling. What this first tells us is Jonas never had felt cold before. He had never felt warmth before because every single day in his society is exactly the same. There's no seasons. There's no nothing, basically. There's no nothing, okay? So Jonas is immediately thinking, oh, wow, that was amazing. That was so much fun. I can't wait to learn more outside of what I was originally taught was the bounds of my ability to understand things, right? And let's pause here and talk about how that applies to the real world again. A lot of the time, some people, and especially, and I always map to Mormonism because that's where I'm most knowledgeable, okay? In the church, they teach, a lot of people leave the church because they wish to sin. They wish to break the rules. They want to experience the fun stuff, the stuff that's forbidden, but is, temporarily fun. For example, smoking weed, okay? Like, just as an example. They're like, oh yeah, they just wanted to smoke weed, so they left. And it's that's possibly true. And I think that this book kind of highlights that by saying Jonas is now understanding that there are many things that society kind of kept from him that were good things, like the experience of riding down a sled in the snow. Or later, he learns what sunshine is and what it feels like to have the sun warm you, okay? Like, these kinds of things. And in the real scenario, the Mormon church scenario, that response is met with a skepticism of, this person must have nefariously chosen to stop believing in our truth because they wanted to have that fun, fleeting thing, okay? But this book kind of addresses that in a way. And the way it addresses it is Jonas wasn't seeking out to have these fun new things, right? Jonas always wanted to be a good member of society. Jonas always wanted to follow all the rules. He felt guilt when he was ever feeling like an individual. He felt guilt and shame and anxiety when he was othered out in that ceremony of 12s. he felt a little bit of guilt when he had those dreams of, sexuality, the stirrings they were called, right? And he felt most at peace when he was doing exactly what society told him to do. Yet, when he got the knowledge of the stuff outside of society, and to be clear, the knowledge that he was not seeking, he learned that the things that had been suppressed from him were happy thoughts. So let's reapply that to the Mormonism, the common argument. The common argument, like I said, being if you went and did this thing after you left the church, it's because all you wanted to do was that thing. You basically, Satan tempted you, okay? What they fail to consider is, what about the case where someone starts discovering the truth outside of the church and has these fun or good experiences, but they weren't motivated by them. They were motivated by learning the truth, like Jonas was, and that was kind of his job. And I think that's an important question to ask and an important thing to keep in mind when you're thinking about how to apply this kind of thought process that the book questions to a religious one, okay? So let me move forward a little bit. Let me speed it up a little bit because we're already at 26 minutes, okay? As Jonas begins to understand these happy memories and this back when there were a lot of fun things you could experience, the giver kind of decides, okay, it's time. I've given you some of the happy stuff. We need to start handing off some of the bad stuff too, because honestly, that's the more valuable stuff. That's where you get most of your wisdom, right? So Jonas then begins being given other memories such as pain. Specifically, he's given a memory where he breaks a leg, or the person who, whatever, a leg is broken. He feels the pain of a leg being broken. He looks down and sees the slaughtering of his leg. He's given visions of war. He's given visions of people basically lying on the ground like, please help me, I'm dying right now, I just got shot, basically, okay? He's given feelings of, he's given what it feels like to literally starve, feeling starvation, feeling like your stomach is literally completely compressing, okay? So Jonas is beginning to see and understand everything about society, and by or outside of society, and by everything I mean just scratching the surface. And he's starting to realize, I want to learn more, but I don't know if the pain of learning more is worth it, because I'm learning some of the most horrible things ever. And at times in the book, you see him kind of struggling with this idea of, I just miss being a kid. I just miss feeling like everything was lined up perfectly for me. I miss this feeling of certainty, this feeling of, safety, this feeling of certain. I think certainty is the best way to put it, because he was so limited in what he was allowed to think. He felt very certain within that limited box, right? There's another example of this too, because Jonas starts seeing that there can be a lot more that he can get out of life beyond what society originally had told him, okay? So one of the visions that the giver gives him is, the giver even describes it as one of his favorite memories of all time. And this memory is in a house with a fireplace going, there's a tree that they describe inside the house, which Jonas finds a little strange, that's all lit up and beautiful. There's presents wrapped under the tree. And there's one couple sitting on the couch who probably, I think they describe them as somewhere in their 40s or whatever. There's children under the tree. And then there's an older, elderly couple, also sitting around. And Jonas gets out of this vision and he asks the giver, he's like, what was that? That felt amazing. That was one of the greatest feelings I've ever had. The giver says that was love. That's what love feels like. Jonas asks other questions like, why were there old people there? Because for us, the old people all just, are meant to go away eventually. Why are they still together? Especially because they're not supposed to be in a relationship beyond after they've raised their kid, is the idea. And the giver continues to explain to him that's how life used to be. People would love forever. They would fall in love and stay in love. They would stay within their family units forever, that kind of stuff. They'd give gifts. They would find pure joy, blah, blah, blah. So Jonas, thinking that was amazing, that was one of the greatest feelings I've ever felt, decides to go back to his family and kind of hint at this idea, okay? So he goes back, he asks his parents, he goes up to his dad, I think, or maybe his mom, and he goes, can I ask you guys a question? And his parents are like, of course, anything, just ask us. His parents, he asks his parents very directly, do you love me? And the response that Jonas gets from his parents is, well, you know that we're not supposed to use imprecise language, right? That is part of the rules of society. And Jonas goes, well, yes, I do. And then they try to reassure him, and they say, remember, we are proud of your accomplishments. We enjoy you. We're happy that you're part of our family unit. But it's inappropriate to use the word love because that's not the emotion we're feeling. Obviously, Jonas is a little hurt by that, especially given that he starts thinking, I've experienced love now, and I've kind of identified the people in my life that I would want to love, or I'd want to love me. And they are not only, they do not only not love me, they don't understand what love even is. They've never experienced it, and they probably never will. Okay? So, Jonas starts thinking, okay, there's way more in this society that's been suppressed. Excuse me. The good and the bad, right? He starts kind of coming to this realization that he's been living in not just ignorance, but like very, very strong ignorance on so many things. And, you know, let's take a pause here and let's talk about the real life implications again. This is how it feels when you are, I don't want to say indoctrinated, but I think that is the only word I can think of. Indoctrinated into a world where you're expected to have these certain feelings, you're expected to do these certain things, you're expected to do all of that. And if you start discovering that you can get you can get these same emotions from elsewhere, or you can get stronger emotions from elsewhere, or you can feel things you've never felt before, think about things you've never thought about outside of this, it can feel extremely isolating and extremely, you know, scary to go back to the people you thought, you know, knew it all, and the people who kind of led you along this whole path so far, and ask them these questions. And not only are they unable to contend with it, they don't even understand why or how you're at, like where this question is coming from. They will never understand. And that feeling of isolation, Jonas is clearly struggling with in this section of the book. And it's a struggle that many people who've left their religion, or maybe who've changed politics from their parents, or anything, you know, questioned their parents or done something different than their parents wanted anyway, has probably experienced that feeling of isolation, that feeling of realization that your parents don't have all the answers, that kind of stuff. And I think that's an interesting way this book explores that idea in an extremely interesting and unique way. Okay. So after this I love you disaster that Jonas goes through, Jonas decides, I need to stop doing any of the other stuff too. So he begins to stop taking those pills that his parents told him he had to start doing in order to stop the stirrings. Once he does that, he starts having these same dreams again about that girl that he had dreams about before. And he describes them as pleasurable, happy, good dreams. And he starts also questioning why the society wants these happy emotions suppressed, right? If the society doesn't want to experience, or it doesn't even have the ability to experience love, it doesn't have the ability to experience lust, sexual desire, having, you know, a happy family, children, all of this stuff, right? So that's an interesting way to look at it, right? Because Jonas is thinking, I used to get all of my fulfillment and happiness from doing what this, and I learned as much as I could while staying within this framework that the society laid out for me, right? And once he starts learning beyond what that closed off little society could teach him, he starts questioning some of the things that he took not just for granted, but was happy to take for granted about what the society told him were and were not valuable things to think about and feel, right? So Jonas then goes back to the giver, and they discuss more. They transmit some more dreams, but basically Jonas says, I need to experience elsewhere, which is outside of society. We need to do this. This is not sustainable, this system that we have going right now. The giver agrees, reluctantly, because he knows that it's a very dangerous thing to try to get elsewhere, but they agree. So they devise a plan, Jonas and the giver devise a plan to have Jonas run away and see elsewhere, okay? And this is a section of the book that maps on pretty easily, right? Jonas has been questioning the church for a while. Let's map it back onto Mormonism, okay? And myself. I was questioning the church for a while. I was having all of these doubts. I was starting to try to drop hints to family members. I was like, have you heard about this problematic thing about the church? Have you heard about this? What are your thoughts on this thing that's controversial about the church's teaching? All of this, right? And I felt like I was getting nowhere. I feel like I couldn't think of any possible way to fix this internally. I couldn't figure out a way to there were two paths I saw moving forward. It was either number one, change the church to fix these things, which good luck as a single person, right? In a massive organization, or at the very least help my parents see the light, which is kind of what Jonas struggles with too. He's like, can I fix this society? Or at the very least, can I make my friends and family understand some of the stuff I know? And he starts learning, or he begins to realize the more he tests it, no, I can't. So the only option he has, and by proxy I had, was I need to get out of this controlling environment. I need to get out of this environment that dictates to me what I can and can't think, and and kind of puts bounds on my own potential. Okay, I think that makes sense, right? So Jonas decides, I need to go elsewhere. I need to get out. And that was kind of my feeling too. After a while of realizing I'm not going to fix the church and I'm not going to fix my family, that's a weird way to put it, but help my family see what I see and things like that, I need to find elsewhere. It's the same idea, right? So we're now basically at the end of the book, okay? Jonas devises his plan. He figures out how to go elsewhere. He gets ready to go, and he starts doing it. He goes on the run. He takes his bike to a certain place and then hides his bike, okay? He continues to go and go. And as this journey goes, he gets more and more worried and more scared because he gets to places he's never seen before. Some of them are similar to the memories that the giver's given him. Some of them are brand new to him. But on this journey, he starts realizing how beautiful the world is. Things he has never experienced and seen before. He starts seeing how beautiful. He's like, oh my God, the trees are amazing. And I'm seeing the water, and I'm watching the snow fall, and I'm watching all these things. And I've never experienced any of these things before. And he starts to realize the only possible way I could have experienced these things was by leaving, which is very painful for him to realize. It is also painful for him because he wishes that he could get these experiences to his parents or to his sister or to his friends in the society, because he wants them to experience this beautiful, this love, of beauty of nature that he currently has, but he can't do it, right? And Jonas continues to go, and he's trying to find a new society. And at a certain point towards the very end, it's describing how he's been soaked from rain. He has not been able to get dry. He's been freezing. He's been starving. And then at the end of the book, Jonas comes across a hill. And the hill has snow, and it has a sled on top of the hill, just like the giver showed him in his very first transmitted memory. And Jonas decides, let's get on the sled and let's go down. And the book is about to end, and I want to read to you just the very, very last two paragraphs of the book, okay? After he got on the sled. Downward, downward, faster and faster. Suddenly he was aware with certainty and joy that below, ahead, they were waiting for him, and that they were waiting, too, for the baby. That part I didn't talk about, but read the book. For the first time, he had heard something that he knew to be music. He heard people singing. Behind him, across vast distances of space and time, from the place he had left, he thought he heard music too, but perhaps it was only an echo. I find this ending to this book very vague and very powerful. And the reason I find it powerful is Jonas realizes as he's sledding down into his new life, whether you interpret that to be him passing away or him actually truly finding a new society, that's up for you to interpret as you read the book. I won't even speculate on that because I don't think it's important to my point. But Jonas realizes as he's getting over this final hump, basically, that the people on the other side, or whatever was on the other side, was waiting for him. And they were not just waiting for him; they were greeting him with joy that he had finally discovered the world. Basically, that he had become someone who could think for themselves in a way. And that's kind of what, in my opinion, what the music represents. The love for the world and the understanding that you can kind of form your own life, all of that, okay? And then the interesting last paragraph that I read to you was behind him, back where he came from originally, basically, a long time ago, basically, he thinks he hears music there too, but maybe it was only an echo. And I think that the reason that this ending hits me so hard is, as someone who is personally, as someone who considers themselves fully out of the Mormon church at this point, sometimes I kind of look at it as I still hear music, in a sense, coming from that past. You know what I mean? There were a lot of great lessons I was taught from the church, a lot of things I learned that were very, very valuable, a lot of great people, a lot of great lessons, a lot of great experiences. And sometimes I look back on it and I'm like, there's still something to be gotten out of that church. You know what I mean? There's still some stuff that's extremely valuable and extremely important. But perhaps it's only an echo. Perhaps I'm only remembering the good parts because it's the only part I want to remember. Because why would I continue to remember all the horrible parts that led me out of it in the first place, right? And I just find that extremely fascinating. And I think that's going to wrap up my thoughts on this book. I think I've given you enough to think about, and I think I've given you an interesting perspective on The Giver. Again, I'll call it out one more time. This is The Giver by Lois Lowry. One of my favorite books of all time. This is my third time reading it, and I learn something new from it every time. Would highly recommend you read it, and I hope you learned something about why it's so important to me as a book as well. Hope you have a good rest of your day. Happy New Year.